It's 4:30 a.m., and I'm on my way, leaving Glendale, California, to drive 3.5 hours north to the Sierra Nevadas. The hour's early for sure, but it's one of those times where you sort of get to forget about time and make a very peaceful transition from a large city to the desolate high desert on Highway 395. And as the sun rises over the mountains in the east, I feel like I'm in a completely different place, which is part of the magic of getting out of here and getting away from the technology, the schedules, the timelines, and all the rest of the pressures that exist in my modern life. Backpacking, for me, becomes this moment to reconnect with myself and also to forget myself, to forget the memories, the regrets, the ambitions that I've carried with me day to day, that I wake up with and go to sleep with. On this final episode of Rebel Nature Season 1, I'm going to take a more personal POV. I'm going to go through my journal entries that I wrote during my backpacking trip that I took this summer of 2024, to the highest and most remote lake in the 48 state, Lake Tulayino, which sits at 12,800 feet, right in the shadow of Mount Whitney. I had to scramble up boulders and go completely off trail for an entire day just to reach it. So what is the value of a place so remote that maybe 5 or 6 humans see it every year at the most? And why do I even do these extreme adventures? And how does nature sit in my mind and change my perspective of the modern world when I'm out there? And finally, what lessons can I bring to you that can recap what we've talked about this year? My name is Christopher Grant Ward, and this is Rebel Nature. I'm an award-winning artist and naturalist obsessed with the ways nature can rewire our brains and change our perspective of everyday things. I'm so happy you're listening. I've hiked in the Sierras quite frequently. If you've listened to this podcast, you know it's one of my favorite places to go long-distance backpacking. And I have hacked the John Muir Trail completely, end-to-end, twice, as well as more than a dozen adventures through adjacent trails and national parks. However, this adventure I'm going to talk about today is even more special because it's something I've never done before. I'm actually going to leave the trail entirely, hike up a mountain, and find a lake that's up right next to Mount Whitney. And while Mount Whitney itself is well visited every year by thousands of hikers, this lake, Lake Tulayino, is only about a mile or two away as the crow flies, but is extremely remote and difficult to get to. It's the highest lake, as I mentioned, of any reasonable size in the 48 states. I've seen scattered photos of it before, but I've certainly never been close to there, yet. And I think about it all the time. It's my desktop image on my computer. It was my poster image in my office in New York City. The image that was supposed to sort of describe me abstractly. It's been a place I've wanted to go for at least 10 years, ever since I learned about it. But I've never been. And that's got me thinking a little bit about rebel nature and the wild places. The wild places that we know exist every day, out there in the world, in the Arctic, in Siberia, in Africa, in South America, Patagonia, and now even here. In the most populated state in the United States, there are still wild places that are unsettled and unvisited. And what value can we put on them? What is the intrinsic value of a place you can't build a home on, that you can't extract oil from? These places that we go out of our way as a nation to preserve for their intrinsic value, what does that say about our society? And what can we learn from those ideas? Okay, so enough preamble. Let's just talk. Let's dive into these journals that I made and catch up to where I am in the Sierras. As I drive up the 395, the buildings fall into more and more disrepair. Buildings become barns. Coffee shops suddenly are 70 years old and slowly begin to miss their doors, their windows, and then their roofs, open to the high desert air, sharing fields with cattle, solar panels, and new aqueducts. It's 7 a.m., and the sun is now firmly in the east. It's 71 degrees down here, but it's going to get a lot cooler. Because you see, we have to take the highest highway in the country, or at least in California, to get to our destination at Cottonwood Lake's trailhead. And to do this, we're going to ascend 2,000 to 3,000 feet up a steep, narrow highway that cuts along the eastern side of the Sierras at Lone Pine, California. And eventually I found the trailhead. I got my gear out slowly in the cold morning air. I used the restroom. I filled my canteens with water, and I headed out. Now, for all of you listening, from here, I'm going to just cite the time and date of the journal entries as I went. While they're all individual thoughts, they connect to a similar narrative. August 23rd, 2:33 p.m. I think we tend to think of the world as the most advanced and modern that it's ever been. And I suppose in the sense and definition of those words, perhaps that's true, but maybe it's just in its nascent era, at a point where the world is trying us on to see if we fit, to see if we scratch its neck too much or if we fit too tightly around the waist. Maybe the world is giving us a chance to stretch out a little bit, like my brand new boots. Maybe the earth has a timeline that we don't comprehend. Maybe it's our obligation to do our best to accommodate it, and not the other way around. We do a poor job of accommodating the world. Only in my wildest dreams would we ever be able to serve it. How would we ever? August 24th, 12:45 a.m. In the midnight where I stood at Soldier Lake, I saw 1,000,000 stars and one half moon. I saw the pools and rings of fish, and I felt the gravel beneath my wet wool socks. It was 39 degrees, and I could not, for the life of me, get warm. In the midnight where I slept at Soldier Lake, I could snuggle in as deeply as I could to my sleeping bag, wrapped in an emergency blanket, and alofted by a sleeping pad above the hard granite boulder. But I could not get warm. I could try to be warm, and in the effort of doing so, maybe get a little bit warmer, but I could not be warm the way I wanted to be. In nature, I was not allowed to have the thing that I wanted in the time that I wanted it. No, for that, I would have to wait for the morning and for the sun. I would have to wait until tomorrow before I would be able to feel like myself again. I would have to wait in my tent on this boulder with the fish jumping and the half moon rising, foretelling the coming sunrise, as I lay horizontal and in wet wool socks, waiting for my morning to come. August 24th, 6:52 a.m. One of the most frustrating things about going uphill is then realizing you have to go back down again, just to go back up again. And this can feel, when you're tired and exhausted, kind of like a waste of effort. Like all the effort you spent was for nothing simply because you're giving it away only to have to do it again just to get to the summit you're trying to reach. I think the fallacy here is thinking that getting to the summit is the goal. No, my friend, walking the trail is the goal. And the trail will never move in a way that we can anticipate, the way we can in modern life. Even though it's actually getting you there in the most efficient way possible. There's so many unknowns that have gone into a decision about a trail going up, east, west, down. A river occasionally washing through, landslides, technical feasibility. We just really can never know. I think the point is to not second guess the trail you're on, but to trust that the ups and downs will even out and get you to where you need to go, and that both are important to the cause. The summit is not your goal any more than death could be your goal, but rather to have hiked well and with great partners, to have risen to the cause when you needed to, and made sure you got rest and protected yourself when you needed it most. The summit can't be your goal, because that's the end, and the end is of no satisfaction if the effort and character was not in its right order in the first place. August 23rd, 11:59 p.m. I reached Tulayino Lake at 2 p.m. at 12,800 feet. Up here the wind is so intense that I couldn't bear to get out my journal to write. I could barely take photos and videos. But I did jot down some thoughts in my head as I stared out on the clear azure blue, and I knew I was probably the only person who had seen what I am looking at in quite a while. The reason this lake is set aside for you and me, even if we can never visit it, even if we never see it with our own eyes, must be that deep down, we all know as humans that we can't control our baser impulses. We crave development the way we might crave a midnight snack when we're on a diet. We know that modern life demands the commoditization of everything, of every part of our souls, the quantitative value of goods and services. And in this world, an empty and clear lake, home to me and 2 marmots, hardly measures up. And in our hearts, we know that just knowing these places exist gives us hope that there is a world which has not been designed or controlled or yet shaped by us. That there's a place for things that don't need us, and that is a good thing. But we need them to reset our brains, our hearts, and our everyday ways, and realize what's important. And at this moment, staring into the sun, a 40-mile-an-hour gust knocks me to the talus at my feet. I've just climbed a 400-foot wall after hiking 12 miles off trail, and I am in the middle of nowhere, and no one knows where I am, and it will take me even more time than it already has to get down and back to a river and to camp. In one way, in the briefest of moments, I am tempted to lie back in the grass and let it flow through my fingertips and let the earth take me and return to it. But I'm shook from that thought, gazing across the mountain peaks and away to a commercial airliner that seems twice as close as usual because, well, it is. I remember my wife and my dogs and my life and the value of the world I have waiting for me. And I remember that modern life isn't all bad, just cloudy and messy and noisy and unsympathetic. So I make my way down the high meadow away from the lake, down the wall, losing my canteen to the infinite between the boulders. Dad would be so upset. Down the slopes to the riverbed and to my tent which now feels as civilized as the Glendale home where all my love is stored warm and waiting for me. I did what I came here to do, and now I just want to be home. August 24th, about 5 a.m. or so. I'm sure this is going to ring saccharine to say, or at least cliche, but it's true, so I'm going to say it anyway. The most wonderful thing that you can find hiking and backpacking in nature is yourself. The valleys and the mountains are nothing compared to the pure character you find when everything else is stripped away. The tallest mountains and the highest lakes are simply icons, signifiers of what you could very well attain without the distractions that come from modern life. There's no greater gift that this life can give you than being in perfect harmony with the person that you're meant to be. For me, I found this in my wife, and I found this in nature, and I've found this nowhere else. Everything else feels like a game or a dodge or a hustle, a way to satisfy urges for creativity or fame or achievement. And of course, success, to give me the money that I need to live in this modern world. I'm simply not sure that the modern world is meant for me, but all the people I love are there, and all of my pets, and all of my memories and my childhood, so I can't abandon it completely, and I simply won't. But I'm pretty sure that my choices aren't being made as purely as I would like in modern life. I worry that my life is being spent in service of other people and other goals, and in service of summits and peaks instead of in service of the trail. I wonder what that would be like. This kind of sounds like Zen Buddhism, but in the best ways. August 24th, 6:22 p.m. I've been thinking about this all day. I wonder what it's like to be yourself. Is it something that just seems natural? Do you even realize it when it's happening? Perhaps it's a certainty in every word and every step that comes from deep within instead of from what is learned from or affirmed by people outside. I wonder if this voice that I'm writing is even my voice. Maybe it's too stuffy, or it's too formal, or it's too academic. Maybe it's laid in with the trappings and the things that I think I meant to be or I should or ought to be. I wonder what happens when you distill yourself to your pure essence. What happens? And I truly wonder what happens because I realize I do many of these things only to stave off the risk of being rejected in some way, whether it's in my talent or my perceived value. If I truly was myself and I truly knew it and I truly felt what I was meant to do with every fiber of my being, then I couldn't be rejected. Or at least I couldn't feel the shame of it because there's nothing else for me to be. The trail, as we've said, moves in one direction and there's only one way to go. August 25th, 10 p.m. I don't think anyone would write a eulogy of me saying, "That guy Christopher sure did live for the moment, embracing and savoring every detail as it happened." Surely they would say I had a lot of ambitions and thought about the future and I thought about my past. But I'm not sure anyone would say, "Hey, here's a man who relished every moment." Not sure if that's good or bad. Pretty sure that's bad. Except it's a lesson that makes me realize I'm probably not relishing every moment. And those are all the moments I have. Right? August 27th, 6 a.m. I didn't make any journal entries on the last day. And I'm not sure why, except that maybe I felt that it was better to ruminate in my head instead of putting them down on paper. But sitting at home in my bed at 7 a.m., I realized a day ago I was 15 miles into the backcountry. I was about to hike 2,000 feet up and 3,000 feet down on a mountain cliff. My lips were chapped and my face was covered in sunscreen and dust. A handful of granola and a small metal cup for water. This morning, I'm sipping coffee from a porcelain mug and staring at my feet and candles in a little fireplace. My dog is sleeping comfortably on my lap under a fleece blanket. My wife is planning her day on her laptop. I love this morning and yesterday morning, and there's no reason not to love it all. So why do these places exist? Well, I know that we would feel sad if they were gone. But what I especially value about them, especially places I know I'll never visit, is that I do think humanity needs to know that there are wild places we are preserving. We need to know we haven't consumed the entire world with our obsessive compulsion for technology and civilization and progress. There's always going to be a part of us that longs for simple and wild places, even if we never visit them. It gives us some comfort to know they exist. This is the existence value of things. The value of things never seen, never visited, and yet admired and loved. Thank you for listening. This is the finale of Season 1 of Rebel Nature, and I have to admit, it was a little challenging to do in and among all the work I had in the fall. So I'm going to have to do a better job planning so I can be more consistent. And I promise to do so because in Season 2, we have so much planned. Interviews with scientists and spiritual healers and journalists, learning about the stories of people who are out there trying to save these natural wild places. In the meantime, I encourage you to like the podcast and follow it, and give it a rating. It really does make a difference. And finally, I would encourage you to share this with just one person that you think might find this podcast worthwhile. Have a great rest of your 2024, and I will see you in the new year. Support for Rebel Nature comes from an affiliate partnership with Blick Art Supplies. Rebel Nature is managed and produced by Quail Run Studios. Original music written and recorded by me. Any commercial music that may have been used in this episode has been licensed for airplay by the Harry Fox Agency, 40 Wall Street, New York, New York. You can learn more about me and my art at ChristopherGrantWard.com.